Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to let me know where you're from. The cathedral's hallowed silence was shattered, but not by a joyful "I do." It was invaded by the deafening sound of a heartbreaking. Within the ancient stone walls of St. Mary's Royal Almudena Cathedral, a sanctuary that had witnessed countless vows of eternal love, Amelia's world was ending. Her trembling hands clutched a phone, its screen a cruel beacon of cold, final words. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Sebastian, the billionaire tycoon who had sworn her undying love, had just abandoned her at the altar. Dressed in a gown that could barely conceal her 5-month pregnancy, Amelia felt the ground give way beneath her feet. 300 of Madrid's elite guests began to whisper, their hushed tones a chorus of judgment, as she stood paralyzed, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. The bouquet of white calla lilies slipped from her numb fingers. Her breath caught in her throat as she struggled for composure. It wasn't just her heart Sebastian had decided to shatter. Within her womb, 2 tiny lives, twins, were already feeling the sting of abandonment by the man who should have been their protector. What would you do in Amelia's shoes? Would you collapse, or would you find a way to stand tall? "Miss Amelia, are you all right?" The concerned voice of the priest barely registered. Tears, held back by a fragile pride, threatened to spill over at any moment. This wasn't the first humiliation Amelia had endured at Sebastian's hands. Throughout their 2-year relationship, he had constantly belittled her at social gatherings, criticized her too simple dresses for his standards, and even asked her not to mention her humble origins to his friends. The memory of his words echoed in her mind now. "Darling, when they ask about your family, just say they're northern industrialists. It sounds so much better than saying your dad was a plumber." The discovery of her pregnancy was met with a chilling indifference that should have been a warning. "Are you sure they're mine?" Sebastian had asked with a twisted smile. "Maybe we should take care of this problem before it goes public. You know, I have a reputation to maintain." A sob escaped her throat as the murmurs grew louder. Some guests looked on with thinly veiled pity. Others, with the malicious pleasure of those who always believed this girl from the wrong side of town would never fit in their exclusive circle. "Come with me, child." A wrinkled but firm hand took hers. Mrs. Trinidad, the longtime cook for Sebastian's parents, appeared like a guardian angel among the hostile crowd. At 70, the small woman radiated more dignity than everyone present combined. "He doesn't deserve a single one of your tears." With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Amelia lifted her chin and walked toward the church exit. Each step was an ordeal, each glance a fresh wound. The expensive gown now felt like a cage of silk and lace. Her heels clicked on the marble like a countdown to the end of one life and the beginning of another. Uncertain and terrifying one. "Look at them closely, Amelia," Mrs. Trinidad whispered as they moved down the aisle. "Remember every face. One day, when they least expect it, you will return with your head held high." Outside, Madrid's sun seemed to mock her. How could the world keep turning when hers had just stopped? The limousine that was meant to take them to the reception was gone. Even in this, Sebastian had been meticulously cruel. "Come to my house," Mrs. Trinidad offered. "It's nothing grand, but there's room for you and for those little angels you carry inside." 2 weeks after the abandonment, Amelia watched helplessly as Sebastian's company employees cleared out her belongings from the luxurious apartment. "The property is in the company's name," the lawyer had explained coldly. "Mr. Sebastian regrets it or it's any inconvenience." Mrs. Trinidad's small flat in Lavapiés was the polar opposite of the luxury Amelia had grown accustomed to. Chipped paint, worn but clean furniture, and the smell of Madrid stew. It was all strangely comforting. There was no pretense here. Life was authentic. "I always knew that boy was no good," Mrs. Trinidad would say, while knitting tiny shoes for the babies. "I watched him grow up, you know. He always had that cruelty. Once he stepped on the tail of the house cat just to see it suffer. His mother would justify it by saying it was just a child's game, but Mrs. Trinidad knew something dark was growing inside him. Amelia caressed her belly, where Carlos and Jorge, the names she had already chosen for her sons, stirred restlessly. "How am I going to support them? I have nothing, Trinidad. No job, not enough savings, no family in Madrid." "You have something much more valuable," the old woman replied. "Dignity and strength. And you have me. It's not much, but it's a start." The job search was more difficult than expected. Her resume, with incomplete studies and limited work experience, didn't impress anyone. Eyes would invariably drift to her swollen belly, and the excuses were always the same. "We'll call you. We're looking for a different profile. Maybe after the babies are born." It was Mrs. Trinidad, who on a rainy afternoon arrived with a hopeful smile. "The El Olivar restaurant in Lavapié is looking for waitresses. The owner, Manuel, is a good man. I've told him about you, and he's willing to meet you." The restaurant was a cozy spot in the heart of the multicultural neighborhood. The aroma of olive oil, garlic, and fresh herbs filled the air, mixing with the lively chatter in Spanish and Italian. Manuel, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and work-worn hands, greeted her with an honest smile. "Mrs. Trinidad says you're a hard worker and honest," he said after hearing her story. "That's enough for me. The pregnancy isn't a problem. We'll make the necessary adjustments. You can start tomorrow." That night, for the first time since the abandonment, Amelia cried tears of relief. Curled up in the small bed in the room she shared with Mrs. Trinidad, she whispered to her babies, "We'll make it, my loves. Step by step, day by day, we will build a dignified life." Her first day at El Olivar was a foreseeable disaster. Her swollen feet protested inside the black shoes. Her back ached as if 1,000 needles were stabbing it. The tray felt heavier with each passing moment, and orders jumbled in her exhausted mind. The climax came when she stumbled slightly, sending a full tray of fresh pasta flying onto a customer at the central table. The silence that followed was so thick it could have been cut with one of the knives that now lay on the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir," Amelia stammered, mortified, as she tried to clean the man's ruined shirt. Her hands shook, and tears threatened to overwhelm her. "Please, let me." To her surprise, the man, who turned out to be Manuel, showed not anger, but understanding. "It's all right, Amelia. It's just a stain, and it will come out. Are you okay? You look exhausted." This sincere concern was what finally broke down her defenses. In the small staff bathroom, Amelia let go of all the accumulated pain. She cried for the betrayal, for the fear of the future, for the uncertainty of raising 2 children alone, for the public humiliation, and for her lost dignity. When she emerged with swollen eyes and smudged makeup, she expected to find her things packed and a sympathetic farewell. Instead, Manuel was waiting for her with a cup of hot tea and an unexpected proposition. "We have a small apartment at the back of the restaurant," he explained. "We used it as a storeroom, but with a few improvements it could be a decent home. It's yours if you want it, in exchange for a few extra hours of work when you feel up to it." The generosity of the gesture left her speechless. "Why?" was all she could ask. Manuel smiled with a hint of melancholy. "My mother came to Spain from Italy with nothing but the clothes on her back, and pregnant with me. Someone lent her a hand when she needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same." That night, as she helped close the restaurant, Amelia felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope, the empty space, with its red and white checkered tablecloths, chairs stacked on tables, and the lingering aroma of the kitchen gave her a sense of home she had never experienced in the luxurious apartment she had shared with Sebastian. The next day, with the help of Mrs. Trinidad and some of the restaurant's employees, Amelia moved into the small back apartment. It was modest, just a bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a space that served as both kitchen and living room. But it was clean, and above all, it was safe. As she unpacked the few belongings she had managed to salvage, she found a photo of her and Sebastian during their happy days. The contrast between that hopeful young woman and the one who now looked back at her from the bathroom mirror was stark. However, instead of feeling self-pity, a fierce determination took hold of her. "This isn't the end," she told herself, stroking her belly. "This is just the beginning of our true story." The sounds of the restaurant filtering through the walls, lively conversations, spontaneous laughter, the clinking of glasses and cutlery, formed a comforting symphony. Within those walls, permeated with the aroma of homemade tomato sauce and freshly baked bread, Amelia and her unborn babies had found not only refuge, but a chance to heal. "And I will never let anyone hurt us again," she promised her children as she prepared for her first night in her new home. "From now on, it's us against the world, my little fighters, and I promise you, we will win this battle." Outside, Madrid continued its nightlife, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that small corner of Lavapiés. But inside those walls, a broken woman was, piece by piece, beginning to rebuild herself. Do you think a person can truly rebuild their life after such a devastating betrayal? The weeks passed with the slow cadence of an old Italian song at El Olivar. Amelia learned to move among the tables with a grace that defied her advanced state of pregnancy. Her hands, once accustomed to expensive creams and perfect manicures, now bore the small marks of honest work, which she looked at each night with silent pride. "You have a natural gift for this," commented Pilar, the 60-year-old cook who commanded the stoves with the authority of a general and the affection of a grandmother. "The way you talk to customers, how you remember their preferences, it's not something you learn. You're born with it." Amelia smiled as she set the table for dinner. "My father always said that dignity isn't in what you do, but in how you do it." Her small back apartment had transformed into a real home. The walls, once bare, now displayed black and white photographs of old Madrid that Manuel had given her. A rocking chair salvaged from a flea market occupied the corner by the window, where Amelia spent hours contemplating the inner courtyard while caressing her increasingly prominent belly. Mrs. Trinidad visited almost daily, always bringing some small treasure for the babies: hand-knitted hats, tiny onesies bought with her modest pension, or simply stories from her youth that made Amelia laugh until she cried. "When I was your age," the old woman recounted, her arthritic fingers knitting tirelessly, "I also fell in love with a man who didn't deserve me. I almost lost myself trying to please him." Amelia looked up in surprise. "You never told me that." "There are pains one keeps to oneself until they find someone who can understand them," Mrs. Trinidad said. She paused, her eyes clouded with distant memories. "His name was Alfonso. He was a musician, and he promised me the moon and the stars. When he found out I was pregnant, he disappeared like the mist on a summer morning." "Did you have a child?" The question escaped Amelia's lips before she could stop it. "A beautiful girl." Trinidad's smile was tinged with melancholy. "Maria, named after my mother. She was born with a heart murmur and only lived for 3 days. Sometimes I think the angels claimed her because she was too perfect for this imperfect world." Amelia knelt beside the old woman, taking her rough hands in her own. "I'm so sorry, Trinidad." "Don't be sorry, child. That loss taught me that we are stronger than we believe." Her eyes lit up with a surprising fierceness. "And now life is giving me a second chance with you and these little ones. The turns destiny takes, isn't it?" That night, as she felt her children move within her, Amelia reflected on the different forms of love. Sebastian's false love, which only knew how to take without giving anything in return. Trinidad's maternal love, which had survived even the death of her daughter. The fraternal love of Manuel and the restaurant employees who had welcomed her without judgment. And now, this new and overwhelming love for two beings she didn't know yet, but who already meant more to her than her own life. A sharp pain in her lower back woke her up at 3 a.m. At first, she thought it was just another of the usual pregnancy discomforts. But when the pain intensified and spread like a scorching wave across her abdomen, panic seized her. "It's too early," she gasped. "I'm only 7 months along." With trembling hands, she dialed Mrs. Trinidad's number. The old woman answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for the call. "I'm on my way. Don't move." The minutes it took for Mrs. Trinidad to arrive felt like an eternity. When she finally appeared, accompanied by Manuel, who had been alerted by her call, Amelia was already soaked in sweat, fighting another devastating contraction. "We have to get her to the hospital right now," Trinidad declared after a quick examination. "The birth has come early." Manuel scooped her into his arms, as if she weighed nothing, carefully carrying her down the stairs, while Trinidad grabbed the small bag Amelia had prepared weeks ago for this moment. The drive to the hospital in Manuel's old seat was a blur of traffic lights, deserted streets, and words of encouragement. "Breathe, Amelia, breathe," Trinidad repeated, holding her hand. "Your little warriors have decided to meet the world early, but they'll be all right. They're fighters, just like their mother." The hospital greeted them with the cold efficiency of a night emergency. A nurse quickly assessed the situation and called the on-call gynecologist. "Premature birth, twins, first-time mother," she announced, while placing Amelia on a gurney. The following hours blended into a whirlwind of pain, fear, and hope. Amelia, hooked up to monitors that tracked her son's heartbeats, fought with a strength she never knew she had. Trinidad never left her side, wiping her forehead, whispering prayers, and giving her strength. "Sebastian should be here," Amelia murmured during a moment of lucidity between contractions. "Exactly who should be here is here," Trinidad responded firmly. "The people who truly love you." When the doctor announced it was time to move her to the operating room due to complications, panic took hold of Amelia. "Will my babies be okay?" "We'll do everything we can," was the honest but not very reassuring answer. Manuel, who had been in the waiting room for hours, jumped up when he saw the gurney pass. "I'll be here when you come out," he promised, squeezing her hand briefly. "You three are family now." The operating room was an aseptic and terrifying space, filled with blinding lights and intimidating equipment. Amelia, semi-conscious from the anesthesia, felt as if she were watching everything from outside her body. The doctors' voices came in distorted, talking about blood pressure, fetal heart rate, and possible complications. "I want to see my sons," she begged, though she wasn't sure if the words ever left her mouth. The weak but determined cry of the first baby broke through the fog of her consciousness. "It's a boy," someone announced. Moments later, a second, more high-pitched cry joined the first. "Another boy. Congratulations, Mom." When they finally let her hold them, wrapped in hospital blankets, and so tiny they fit perfectly in her hands, Amelia felt the entire universe shrink to those two wrinkled faces. Carlos and Jorge, her little miracles, had come into the world against all odds, determined to live, determined to fight. "You're perfect," she whispered, kissing their tiny foreheads. "And you're mine, only mine." Sebastian was informed of the birth via a cold text message sent by Amelia 3 days later. His response came in the form of a flashy bouquet of flowers and a check as a contribution for expenses without bothering to visit his sons. However, he insisted on legally acknowledging paternity, more concerned with social appearances than with establishing a real bond with the little ones. The return to the apartment above the restaurant was a mix of joy and challenges. The twins, though premature, showed surprising vitality. Their crying at all hours, the endless nights, the diapers, the feedings. It all became a strenuous dance that Amelia performed with the determination of someone who knows there is no other option. Manuel had redecorated the space during her absence. 2 simple but beautiful cribs now occupied a corner of the bedroom, and a makeshift changing table leaned against the wall. The small closet overflowed with baby clothes, gifts from the restaurant's employees, and some regular customers who had become fond of the young mother. "I don't know how to thank you all for this," Amelia said, moved when she saw the changes. "You would do the same for any of us," Manuel replied simply. "Besides, these little ones are already part of the Olivar family." The first few months were an exercise in endurance and adaptation. Amelia learned to function on just a few hours of fragmented sleep. During the day, while the twins slept, she helped with the restaurant's administration, discovering a natural talent for numbers she didn't even know she possessed. "We're wasting too much product," she commented one day while reviewing supplier invoices. "If we implement a more efficient inventory system, we could reduce costs without sacrificing quality." Manuel looked at her in astonishment. "Where did you learn about this?" Amelia shrugged, surprised by her own audacity. "I was always good at math in school. And I observe, Manuel. I observe, and I learn." The inventory control system she developed reduced the restaurant's waste by 30% in the first quarter of implementation. Soon, Amelia found herself taking on more responsibilities. She negotiated with suppliers, organized staff schedules, and suggested menu modifications based on the season and demand. "You should consider studying business administration," Manuel suggested one afternoon as they closed the day's accounts. "You have a natural instinct for business." The idea planted a seed in Amelia's mind. Was it possible? Could she really build a career, an independent life, for herself and her sons? With the support of Mrs. Trinidad, who offered to watch the twins, Amelia began taking online night courses. The few free hours she had were spent studying, absorbing knowledge with the voracity of someone who has belatedly discovered their true calling. Sebastian, meanwhile, paid child support payments grudgingly, often late, and never in proportion to his considerable fortune. His visits to the children were rare and superficial, like someone fulfilling an unpleasant obligation. "They're identical to me," he commented during one of his rare appearances, observing the babies with a mix of possessive pride and emotional distance. "I hope they inherit my business intelligence, not your practicality." Amelia had learned not to let his words hurt her. "What they will inherit, Sebastian, is the ability to love sincerely, something you would never understand." As the twins grew, so did Amelia's self-confidence. She was no longer that insecure young woman who measured her worth by a man's approval. Now she recognized herself in the mirror, a strong, capable woman, determined to forge her own path. The day Carlos took his first steps, wobbling toward her with a gap-toothed smile, Amelia cried with happiness. Jorge followed just a few hours later, as if he didn't want to be left behind. The restaurant staff celebrated the milestone with a small impromptu party, and Manuel toasted to the future restaurateurs of Madrid. That night, as she watched her son sleep, Amelia wrote in the journal she had started keeping since their birth. "Today, my loves took their first steps into the world. Someday they will understand that their mother is also learning to walk again. Every day that passes, I move a little further away from your father's shadow and find my own son. I promise you that when you grow up, you will see a woman you can be proud of, not for what she has, but for what she has overcome, not for who loves her, but for how she has loved. And above all, I promise you that I will never, ever let anyone make you feel less than you are. Two perfect miracles that saved me when I was most lost. Outside, Madrid slept under a blanket of stars. In the small apartment above El Olivar, an unconventional family was finding its way to happiness, one step at a time, one day at a time, among olive trees and hopes. What kind of future do you envision for Amelia and her family? The twins' first birthday was celebrated at El Olivar, with the emotional intensity of a milestone that had seemed impossible 12 months ago. The restaurant closed early for an intimate party where Pilar's homemade cake, decorated with 2 small sugar olive trees symbolizing the twins, was the centerpiece. To the first year of our little fighters, Manuel toasted, raising his glass, while all the employees formed a circle around Amelia and her sons. And to their mother, the bravest woman I've ever known. Amelia's eyes welled up as she looked at this makeshift family that destiny had given her. Mrs. Trinidad, who proudly acted as an adoptive grandmother, Pilar, and the rest of the kitchen staff, who spoiled the children with sweets and songs, the waiters, who had taught them their first words in Italian. Each of them had contributed fundamental pieces to rebuild her broken heart. "Thank you for turning the worst day of my life into the beginning of the best one," Amelia said, her voice choked with emotion. "Without you, I don't know where we would be now." Carlos and Jorge, oblivious to the profound meaning of the moment, laughed and splashed in the mashed potatoes, exhibiting the infectious joy of those who don't yet know the complications of the world. Their crystalline laughter was the best gift for Amelia, living proof that the most difficult decisions can bring the sweetest rewards. Sebastian did not attend the celebration, though he sent a pair of wooden horses imported from Switzerland with a terse card signed by his secretary. Amelia put the toys in the closet, deciding that her sons would receive them when they were old enough to understand that expensive gifts do not replace genuine presence and love. That night, after putting the little ones to bed, Amelia met with Manuel in the restaurant's office to review the month's numbers. What began as a routine accounting session turned into a conversation that would change the course of their lives. "Esteban has decided to retire," Manuel commented, studying the meticulously prepared reports from Amelia. "He wants to sell his share of the business." Amelia looked up in surprise. Esteban was one of the 3 founding partners of El Olivar, along with Manuel and Raúl. At 70, he had been the creative soul behind many of the restaurant's emblematic dishes. "Do you have a buyer already?" she asked, feeling an inexplicable pang of anxiety at the idea of a stranger entering a space she considered sacred. Manuel looked at her intently, with an intensity that unnerved her. "Actually, I was thinking of you." The silence that followed was so thick that Amelia could hear her own heart beating faster. "Me? Manuel, that's impossible. I don't have the necessary capital. I'm just starting my studies, and the boys have an exceptional mother who is teaching them the value of effort and perseverance," Manuel interrupted gently. "As for the capital, we can come to an agreement. I'm offering you an initial 10% stake, with a loan that you could gradually pay off with your work, and a percentage of the profits." Tears began to slide down Amelia's cheeks, and she couldn't stop them. They weren't tears of sadness, but of that overwhelming emotion that arises when someone recognizes a value in you that you yourself had never been able to see. "Why me?" she finally managed to articulate. Manuel's smile lit up his face, weathered by years of hard work. Because in the year you've been here, you've shown more passion, intelligence, and dedication than many professionals with decades of experience. Because you've transformed our systems and brought fresh ideas without losing respect for tradition. But most of all, because I believe in you, Amelia. I believe in the woman who rose from the ashes and who deserves this opportunity. That night, Amelia could barely sleep. Manuel's proposal danced in her mind like a melody impossible to silence. Could she really take this leap? Was she ready to take on such a responsibility? And most importantly, did she deserve this second chance after having made so many mistakes in the past? The answer came at dawn, as she watched her sons sleep peacefully. For them, for herself, for the woman she was discovering herself to be, she had to dare to dream big. She had to definitively break the invisible chains that still tied her to her past with Sebastian. I accept, she told Manuel that same morning, with a determination that surprised even Mrs. Trinidad. But I want to earn every penny of the stake with my effort. I don't want shortcuts or special favors. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Amelia divided her days between caring for the twins, who were growing up healthy and mischievous, her administration studies, which she now pursued with renewed purpose, and the intensive learning of all aspects of the restaurant business under Manuel's patient tutelage. The secret is in the details, he explained as they toured the market together, personally selecting each ingredient. In knowing your suppliers by name, in remembering the preferences of your regular customers, in treating your staff like the family they are. Amelia absorbed every lesson like a sponge, discovering in the process not only the secrets of the business but also a new version of herself, a capable, respected woman valued for her ideas and hard work. It was during this time of transformation that Lucia entered their lives. The young chef, a recent arrival from Barcelona with an impressive resume and infectious energy, had been hired to refresh some aspects of the menu without losing El Olivar's traditional essence. We need new blood in the kitchen now that Esteban is retiring, Manuel had explained. Someone with roots in tradition, but with wings to fly toward the contemporary. The first encounter between Amelia and Lucia was marked by a curious tension. The chef, with her rebellious hair and direct gaze, challenged some of Amelia's administrative ideas, passionately defending the need to invest in certain premium ingredients, even if it meant an increase in costs. Quality is non-negotiable, Lucia had declared, holding her gaze without blinking. And I assure you that customers know how to recognize it and are willing to pay for it. Far from being offended, Amelia found the professional confrontation refreshing. For years, Sebastian had stifled her voice, convincing her that her opinions were worthless. Now, she was discovering the pleasure of an intellectual debate between equals, where ideas were challenged without implying personal disqualification. Let's do a test, Amelia finally proposed. A tasting menu with your proposals for 1 month. If the results confirm your theory, we'll implement the changes permanently. Lucia's smile was dazzling. It's a deal. Get ready to eat your numbers, Amelia. That initial confrontation quickly evolved into a professional complicity that surprised everyone at the restaurant. Amelia and Lucia, so different in personality and approach, complemented each other in an almost magical way. Where one saw costs, the other saw opportunities. Where one brought caution, the other added audacity. The twins, who were already running around everywhere with the inexhaustible energy of healthy children, adored Aunt Lucia from the very beginning. She taught them how to knead small pizzas in the restaurant's kitchen, invented fantastic stories about vegetables that came to life at night, and made them laugh with her exaggerated imitations of the most peculiar customers. I've never met a woman like you, Lucia confessed to Amelia one night, as they shared a glass of wine after closing. So strong and yet so vulnerable, so pragmatic, and yet so dreamy. Amelia felt an unexpected tingle at those words, and the intense look that accompanied them. It was a forgotten sensation, almost unrecognizable after so much time focused exclusively on her sons and her survival. "Sometimes I wonder who I really am," she replied, contemplating the ruby liquid in her glass. "The Amelia I was with Sebastian seems like a stranger now, and this new version of me I'm still discovering." "I'd like to be a part of that discovery," Lucia whispered, covering her hand with her own in a gesture that might have seemed casual, but contained an implicit promise. That night, as she put her sons to bed, Amelia found herself smiling for no apparent reason. For the first time since the abandonment, her heart was timidly opening to the possibility of loving again. Not with the desperation of someone seeking to be completed by another, but with the serenity of someone who knows she is whole and chooses to share her fullness. The friendship between the two gradually blossomed into something deeper. They shared confidences during breaks, stayed late planning new strategies for the restaurant, and little by little, the lines between professional and personal began to blur. The first time Lucia kissed Amelia was after a particularly successful day. The tasting menu they had designed together had been a resounding success, confirming that their combined vision was unbeatable. "We make a good team," Amelia had commented, exultant with the results. "In more ways than you know," Lucia replied, before closing the distance between them with a soft but determined kiss. That kiss awakened feelings in Amelia that she thought were lost forever. It wasn't the overwhelming, insecure passion she had felt with Sebastian, but something more mature, more serene, based on mutual respect and genuine admiration. Manuel, who had at one point shown a romantic interest in Amelia, watched the blossoming of their relationship with the nobility of someone who puts another's happiness before their own desires. Far from showing jealousy or resentment, he became the couple's main ally, often taking care of the twins so they could enjoy time alone. "You deserve to be happy," he told them one night, after picking up the boys for a trip to the zoo. "And these little ones deserve to see their mother whole, loved by someone who truly values her." Sebastian, who continued to maintain minimal and strictly formal contact with his sons, seemed to sense the change in Amelia's life. His messages became more frequent, subtly inquiring about her personal situation with an interest he had never shown before. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," he wrote on one occasion. "Maybe we were too hasty in breaking up. The boys deserve a traditional family." Amelia, who months ago would have been vulnerable to such manipulation, could now see clearly through his words. Sebastian didn't miss her. He missed the control he had over her, the validation that her unconditional admiration provided him. "Our sons have a family full of love," she responded simply. "They don't need more." By the time the twins turned 2, Amelia had completely transformed her life. Her stake in the restaurant had increased to 15%. Her relationship with Lucia was solidified day by day, and her administration studies were progressing with brilliant grades. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I would be like this today," she commented to Mrs. Trinidad, as they watched the children play with Lucia in the small park near the restaurant. "I would have thought they were crazy. Sometimes the greatest gift comes wrapped in the worst moment of your life." The old woman smiled with the wisdom of her years. "True love is never the one that makes you cry in a church, my dear. It's the one that picks you up afterward and teaches you to fly with your own wings." On the horizon, new challenges and opportunities awaited Amelia. But for the first time in her life, she was not moving toward them with fear, but with the certainty of someone who has finally found her own path. A path with deep roots in El Olivar and wings to fly as high as she dared to dream. The third year in the lives of Carlos and Jorge marked a turning point in the universe Amelia had carefully built around them. The children, who now spoke with the peculiar mix of innocence and wisdom typical of their age, had become the unofficial mascots of El Olivar. Every afternoon, after kindergarten, they would run between the restaurant tables, greeting regular customers by name and stealing olives from the bar with everyone's complicity. "Mommy, can we help Mama Lucia in the kitchen?" they would invariably ask, with those eyes identical to Sebastian's, but with a warmth their father had never possessed. The naturalness with which they had accepted the relationship between Amelia and Lucia was a constant reminder that love, in its purest form, does not understand conventions. For them, having two mothers and an Uncle Manuel who adored them was the most absolute normalcy. "Someday you'll have to explain Sebastian to them," Mrs. Trinidad had warned her during one of her weekly visits. "The children will start asking questions." Amelia sighed, aware that that moment was inexorably approaching. How do I explain that their biological father abandoned them before they were even born? That he questioned if they were really his? That he suggested I get rid of them? "With the truth," the old woman replied simply. "Not the cruel truth that hurts, but the compassionate truth that explains without destroying. You will tell them that sometimes adults make mistakes because they have their own fears and wounds, that their father was not ready for the gift that they are. And above all, you will remind them how much you love them and how many wonderful people have been there for them from the beginning." While this conversation hung in her consciousness, Amelia simultaneously faced new professional challenges. The success of El Olivar had transcended the neighborhood's borders. The innovative fusion between traditional Italian cuisine and native Spanish ingredients, which Lucia had developed with her support, now attracted food critics and customers from all over the city. "We should consider expanding," suggested Raoul, the more conservative partner, during a strategic meeting. "There's a space available in Chambéry. It would be our second location, more focused on a higher income clientele." The idea of expansion stirred mixed feelings in Amelia. On one hand, it represented the definitive validation of her work and vision. On the other, she feared that growth would dilute the family essence that made El Olivar a special place. "If we decide to do it," she replied after a thoughtful pause, "it will have to be while maintaining our values. I don't want us to become an impersonal chain where employees are just numbers and customers are just wallets." Lucia squeezed her hand under the table in a silent gesture of support. Over the months, they had learned to communicate this way, with small gestures that contained entire conversations. "I propose something," Manuel intervened. "Amelia should lead this expansion project. Her stake would increase to 20%, and she would design the entire strategy, from the decor to the personnel selection." The implicit trust in that proposal overwhelmed her. 3 years ago, she had been abandoned at an altar, stripped of dignity and security. Today, 3 people whose opinions she deeply valued were entrusting her with the future of a business they loved. "I accept," she finally said, "but with one condition. I want us to specifically hire single mothers, offering them schedules compatible with childcare and, eventually, an on-site nursery service. I didn't have that support when I needed it most, and I want it to be part of our business identity." The proposal was approved unanimously, and Amelia immersed herself in the project with the methodical passion that characterized her. For months, every free minute between her maternal responsibilities and her studies, which were now in the final stretch, was dedicated to creating a business model that was profitable without sacrificing its soul. On the day of the inauguration of El Olivar de Chambéry, Amelia paused at the entrance of the place, overwhelmed by the materialization of her efforts. The terracotta-toned walls, the olive trees in strategically placed pots, the black and white photographs of Italian and Spanish rural landscapes. Every detail had been carefully selected to convey that blend of tradition and modernity that defined her proposal. "It's perfect," Lucia whispered, hugging her from behind as they watched the first customers enter with expressions of awe. Just like you. The twins, elegantly dressed for the occasion, handed out small baskets of homemade bread to the guests, proud of their official role as junior hosts. Mrs. Trinidad, dressed in a gown she had saved since her youth for truly special occasions, discreetly wiped away tears of pride. "My girl," she murmured when Amelia approached to make sure she was comfortable. "If your father could see you now, he always knew you were destined for great things." The success of the second location exceeded all expectations. In less than 6 months, reservations had to be made weeks in advance. The most influential food critic in Madrid described the restaurant as the perfect fusion of tradition and innovation, led by a businesswoman who understands both flavors and business. It was precisely this article that, by a whimsical coincidence of fate, fell into Sebastian's hands. He hadn't shown up for months, not even for his sporadic visits to the children, limiting himself to sending ostentatious gifts on special dates, always accompanied by elaborate excuses about business trips or unavoidable commitments. The call came on a Tuesday night, when Amelia was reviewing the month's accounts, while Lucia put the children to bed with one of her made-up stories about adventurous vegetables. "Amelia, it's Sebastian." His voice sounded different, with a nuance she couldn't immediately identify. "I saw the article about your restaurant. It looks like things are going well for you." "Things are going well for us, yes," she replied cautiously. "Do you need something?" "The boys are already going to bed." "I'm not calling about them, actually." There was an awkward pause. "I was wondering if we could see each other. To talk, about us." The Amelia of 3 years ago would have felt a jolt in her stomach at such a proposal. The current Amelia only experienced a slight curiosity, mixed with distrust. "There is no us, Sebastian. There hasn't been since you left me at the altar, pregnant with your sons. People make mistakes," he insisted, with that persuasive tone she knew so well. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. Maybe we were too hasty. For the boys, we should try again." Amelia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to control the indignation growing inside her. "Hasty? You call abandoning your 5-month pregnant fiancé hasty? Suggesting I abort your own sons? Showing up in their lives only when it's convenient for you to keep up appearances? That's unfair, Amelia. I've paid child support religiously, with constant delays, and always below what is legally appropriate for your income level," she interrupted. "And money doesn't replace presence, Sebastian. Your sons barely recognize you when you show up with your expensive gifts. Do you know who they call when they have nightmares? Lucia. Do you know who taught them to ride a bike? Manuel. They are their family. The people who have been there every day, through good and bad." The silence on the other end of the line was so dense that for a moment she thought he had hung up. Will Sebastian's reappearance cause problems for Amelia? Or is she strong enough to turn her back on him for good? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment with your opinion on the story.